Welcome to our next lecture. What we are going to be learning about today is Poland and the Blitzkrieg. The Blitzkrieg is very important because this is going to be Hitler's primary battle strategy and battle motive, and the way he's going to punch through pretty much all of Europe. And then Poland is going to be the first country that Hitler fully invades. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we're not going to be able to really talk about the League of Nations as much as I do love to talk about those things. But we're kind of pressed for time now, so we're going to have to keep on pressing forward. Now, before we talk about Blitzkrieg and really define it, we got to talk about Poland and why and how Hitler's going to justify his going to war with Poland. And really, you can kind of see it on the left, but the really biggest thing is Poland had a high number of Germanic people, and Hitler really wanted to reunite this idea of the old German Empire, and then make it bigger, make it greater, make Germany great again, if you will. Kind of a fabulous reunion. And this is how Hitler's going to really justify it. He's going to get the German people that already live in Poland onto his side. Therefore, there's that fewer number of people who are trying to actually fight against him. And he's also going to use this idea of Lebensraum, which is this idea of living space, and thus he needs to expand. So if you look at this picture here, this is kind of like a Nazi propaganda tool that justifies this idea of living space. If you look at the French, they have 42 people per square mile. Britain, they have 47 people per square mile or square kilometer, 42 per square kilometer, 47 per square kilometer, and the 108 per square kilometer. And this is definitely a huge difference and a big issue. And because you can't keep growing your population. Germany's all about growing its population, redefining itself, and becoming a much stronger and larger empire. And you can't become a stronger empire without lands. And to feed your people, you need lands. To get resources, you need land. You need land. So Poland used to be part of Germany. There's actually a small piece of German territory on the other side of Poland. So if we can reunite it, hey ho, we're good to go. Now, another way that Hitler's going to justify the invasion of Poland is he's going to tell the people that the Polish are going to encircle and strangle and attack the German people with the British and French. So again, kind of capitalizing on this post-World War I fear, Hitler's pretty much saying the Polish are against us. They are not happy with the fact that they just basically were created as a result of World War I. They won even more land. The British and the French still don't like us, so they're pretty much going to do exactly what happened in World War I. They're going to group up and push in from both sides, and we quite frankly don't have the strength for that at this time. So what we need to do is we need to fully go on ahead and eliminate the weaker of the two. We can't go after the French because they're too strong, so instead go after Poland. They're the weakest, and then we'll make our move from there. Now, the way that they're going to attack Poland is by using Blitzkrieg. And really this Blitzkrieg is going to take place after August 31st. What happens on August 31st is SS troops, also known as stormtroopers is sometimes what they're referred to, would dress as Polish officers and stage a phony invasion. This will be like the straw that broke the camel's back. As soon as this phony invasion begins, Hitler's going to pose this as like they're scouting us out, they're trying to see whether we're going to react or not. We need to react. German people, with the power of Goebbels' propaganda, they pretty much are like, oh snap, we need to go to war. And this is when Blitzkrieg comes into effect. So obviously, as you can see, this is Germany right here, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Austria, Hungary, the Ukraine, Belarus, and so on and so forth. To any of you who play sports, some of you probably know what Blitzkrieg means, especially the football and maybe basketball players. So a blitz means lightning or fast, and a blitzkrieg means lightning war, and it comes in 3 stages. Stage 1, an attacking of airplanes. You get your Luftwaffe, your jets, your fighter jets, you attack them, you hit them hard and fast with your airplanes. Step 2, pummel the enemy with tanks. Go after them and really go into it. And stage 3, once your airplanes have gone in and really devastated the enemy, your tanks have broken the front lines, your tanks continue moving forward, and you clean up with infantry. Sorry, I didn't mean to go forward too fast. What we're pretty much looking at here is essentially they're using this tactic of blitzkrieg. You fly over with your planes, kind of knock out vital communication. Your tanks push in real hard, especially at these borders, because this is where the front lines are. And then you start to send in your infantry along with the tanks, but also kind of lagging behind. Here's a short video that kind of explains it. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but there's some good information in it.
Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. If you didn't get it from the name, it's about shock and speed. Heinz Guderian, a German officer, thought that organization is the key element, seeing the potential of the internal combusting engine combined with modern communication technology. Germany's strategy was to defeat its enemies in a series of short campaigns. They quickly overran much of Europe and was victorious for more than 2 years by relying on this new military tactic. This tactic was designed to create disorganization among enemy forces through the use of mobile forces and locally concentrated firepower. The goal here was not to let the opponents regroup and reorganize. The tactic was used at the start of the Second World War, September the 1st, 1939. It will start by bombing strategic points and important supply lines by Air Force. The first phase of the attack is to concentrate the forces into one point. Commander will choose that point based on recon. Then shocking the enemy lines will be created with tanks and then with mechanized infantry, which will continue to advance without stopping. The forces behind will ensure the creation of a safe supply line. The shock could drive a breach in enemy defense lines. Armored tank divisions had to penetrate rapidly and advancing continuously. This blow caused shock and disorganization among the defenders. This happened on many fronts, and small rapid pushes were created. In this situation, the others will be unorganized, and those divisions that will not retreat faster will be encircled in a pocket that will be neutralized in a short time. Polish fought really hard to defend their country, but they were overwhelmed by numbers and by this very aggressive military tactic. The Blitzkrieg was after used on the Western Front against France, Belgium.
So we're going to just kind of stop it there and move back. So I really want to drag your attention and just see this. So as you can see, your planes start to fly overhead and they start to take out these communication relays and this important information. As you can see here, this is where your tanks come into play. This is the front line, this is their defense, and these are their troops. Your tanks push in hard, and the most important thing that your tanks do is they cannot stop. They have to keep pushing. So as you can see here, they keep pushing, they keep pushing. This is battalion 1, 2, and 3. If you can separate these 3 battalions, they're much weaker when they're spread apart. And if your tanks continue to push forward and forward and forward, and over multiple areas similar to this, you will eventually separate them. Your infantry moves in and cleans up right there.
Defense lines are more.
So that's kind of the Blitzkrieg in a much more visual method. Now, when it comes to phase 1, we're talking about the airplanes. The use of German aircraft, specifically the Luftwaffe, they're going to fly and bombard crucial enemy targets such as airfields, communication relays, supply fields, and military bases. And what that means is essentially at airfields, you're going to destroy as much of their airplanes so that they cannot counterattack. Communication relays, if you can knock out an enemy's ability to talk between themselves, you've really stopped them very wholeheartedly. Supply fields, they were a little bit careful with this. They didn't want to destroy too many supply fields because you also want to make sure you have an infrastructure there when you move in. And then finally, military bases. And just making sure that you are really moving in and not neutralizing their military. Now, the Luftwaffe was also capable of dive bombing, and during this stage, there would be mass panic within the enemy forces. Dive bombing is a very new and very advanced and very terrifying strategy. The reason is because dive bombing is not only dangerous to the pilot, but it actually gives you a very big tactical advantage over the enemy, because dive bombing is incredibly loud. Incredibly loud. It would probably bust your eardrums, to be honest. And that's really why they really enjoyed dive bombing, because it made it a much more difficult to target, to hit. So this is kind of phase one. Blow in with your airplanes, cause this mass panic by knocking out communication relays, destroying enemy airfields, and weakening their military bases before they go off. Next, you have phase two, which is the Panzer tanks. Now, Germany is going to use fast-moving tanks known as Panzers. And what that means is these tanks, as you can see here on the right, this is what a Panzer tank is right there. These tanks are much more efficient. They move faster, they can go over much more terrain, they're more mobile than the tanks of World War I. And because they are so quick, it really overwhelmed the Polish and French forces, and really the Russian forces, for quite a while. Now, as you saw in the video, the Panzer tank's main priority was to move forward and not to stop unless absolutely necessary. And really that absolute necessity of Panzer tanks when they stopped moving was because they were pretty much dead or out of fuel. And that was about it. Other than that, you keep pushing on, you keep pushing on. You have ground soldiers running next to the tanks and providing cover fire. You have mostly tanks will travel in packs, and then also on top of that you have kind of like Jeeps or Humvees, whatever you might want to call them, driving alongside the tanks. So if there's someone with an anti-tank gun, your infantry can stop them, or all three tanks can shoot on that position and absolutely obliterate it. Now, like I said, armored cars will also drive next to the tank as well to scout ahead, to provide support, and so on and so forth. So this blitzkrieg of a tank is very much so important when it comes to that. So step one, you have your airplanes. They go in, start causing pandemonium. Step two, your Panzer tanks. They start blowing through the front lines. And then finally, step three, you have your infantry, or the SS troops. Now, infantry soldiers follow behind the tanks once the enemy defensive line had been broken. And again, you kind of want to lag a little bit behind the tanks, because you don't want to get too caught up in their fire. They're taking the blunt of the force. That's why they have all that armor and all that support. The infantry really had two jobs: to mop up and to create stable supply lines. And what that really meant was, if there were enemies or pockets of resistance left behind the tanks, again, the tanks don't stop, they keep moving. Your job as the infantry is to kill whatever people are still staying behind. And then finally, supply lines. Hitler learned a lot from the First World War. Him and his generals both did. So they are going to make sure that they have a nice, steady, constant supply line. One of the biggest tools or weapons in a general's arsenal is history. You learn a lot from previous battles and wars, what did and did not work. Every historian today will tell you, if you want to invade Russia, you might want to start in late spring, early summer, because never throughout all of history has Russia ever been beaten during winter. Not against the might of the Nazi war machine, not against the Prussians, Napoleon, the Romans. No one's ever beaten Russia during winter on their home turf. So again, those supply lines are very crucial. Now, killing any enemy forces that remained behind the Panzer tanks, as stated, and supplying those crucial supply lines that were secure and safe from sabotage. That safe from sabotage part does play a very key and important role, as if your supply line is sabotaged, you're going to start running out of resources, and it's going to be very difficult to keep your army alive, for lack of a better term. Now, the Polish government is actually going to fall relatively quickly, and who this guy is the former general / president of the Polish military. Poland is going to be invaded in September 1st, 1939, and is going to fall to both Nazi and Soviet control in October 6, 1939. Blitzkrieg pretty much made the invasion of Poland last only 1 month and 5 days. And essentially, it's because Blitzkrieg was so fast. And of course, the help from the Soviets pushing in from the east and the Nazis pushing in from the west made it pretty much important to for the Polish to fight against the Germans. The Soviet Union is going to invade Poland on September 17th from the east, so about 16 days afterwards, after the Nazis. And the Polish government is actually going to leave the country entirely, and once German forces had taken Warsaw, Poland would be in complete chaos. And what that means by leaving the country entirely, some governments will do what they call rule in exile. So they will leave, like for example, if the United States was under attack, let's say President Trump might go to a different country that is not under attack, let's say like the United Kingdom, and he would rule in exile, or kind of, well, really that's the term for it, is rule in exile, and hope that the country will continue to listen to him. But of course, if you have a foreign power that's actually in control of the land and is actually physically present, you're more likely to listen to them than you are to listen to anyone else. And of course, the British and French would declare a phony war, taking no serious action for 7 months. And really what that means is, having that phony war, they're going to pretty much say, all right, you've attacked an ally. This is a straight up ally. We are going to war. And the Nazis pretty much say, all right, then bring it. And then they just kind of wait for 7 months. It's like being left on red. They just sit there and they're like, okay, well, that was cool. I guess we're just going to chill here now. So when we talk about the Non-Aggression Pact and the splitting of Poland, before the invasion of Poland in August 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union would sign a non-aggression pact, and this was to avoid a two-front war like in World War I. So as you can see, this is Poland right here. If we won't go back, but what happened in World War I was essentially Germany was, let's just say right here, this was Germany right here, France over here, Russia over here, and they got split between these two fronts. You never want to fight a two-front war. Never, ever, ever in your life. Always neutralize one front if you can, and that's what Germany did. They signed this non-aggression pact, and they have this sort of neutral zone, central government, kind of a buffer zone between them and the Soviet Union. After the complete conquest of Poland, the country was actually going to be split in 3 parts. Nazi-controlled Poland, which will be fully controlled by Hitler and under the control of Hitler, which is this brown part over here. Nazi-influenced Poland, a pro-Nazi puppet government is set up in the country of Poland right here. So it's not completely controlled by the Nazis, but it's pretty much controlled by the Nazis. It's kind of a weird area. Essentially, like, no Nazi troops were supposed to be in this area. And then finally, Soviet-controlled Poland, which is where the Soviets are going to take over. And the Soviets were completely fine with taking over this area, this amount of land. Stalin had no issue with it. He just didn't really want to start a war with the Nazis. He was busy with his own stuff, such as the purges. And when we talk about the brutality of the Germans, when we start our genocide unit, you will see some more pictures and images and videos of executions like this. And throughout the invasion of Poland, Nazi soldiers are going to commit numerous war crimes. And by that, it would be executions, forcible displacement, genocide being the primary one. And that'll be, we'll go over all that later throughout the course. Now, a soldier of the 41st Division will actually write, Polish civilians and soldiers were dragged out of everywhere. When we finish our operation, the entire village is on fire. Nobody is left alive. Also, all dogs were shot. The Nazis were brutal. They had no remorse. They had no care. They were willing to do everything. They wanted to ensure that every possible scrap that that could be remembered of that village was completely destroyed, and that included animals, unfortunately. And in just 1 month of fighting, 200,000 Poles are going to die and lose their lives. And this is within 1 month of World War II. 200,000 people will die, and that's in one country. When we talk about the cost of World War II, you'll see that the numbers get disturbingly high. He's also going to Hitler is also going to instruct the creation of death squads, also known as Einsatzgruppen. These are those roaming death squads that I had mentioned before throughout our course, and they're going to annihilate enemies and terrorize Polish citizens into submission through fear. And you may not be full-bred German, and you may not even be partially German. We're not going to get rid of you just yet, but we'll allow you to live, but you will live under fear. So that kind of concludes today's lecture. I try to, again, keep it brief. This is starting our World War I unit. And you do have an argumentative paragraph that you need to write, and is which part of the Blitzkrieg do you believe was the most important? And I want you to explain your answer in a minimum of 5 sentences. Was it part 1, the planes, part 2, the panzer tanks, or part 3, the infantry and the supply lines? And make sure you really do explain your answer. You need to cite the evidence and kind of give, not maybe examples, or well, you could give kind of phony examples, or just go into depth, really explain your answer. Why would part 1 be so important? Why would part 2 be so important? Why would part 3 be so important? Make sure you write that on a Google document, submit that Google document onto the submission area for this post, and then you will be good to go. Thank you so much for watching.